All right. So welcome everybody. My name is John Raymer from the Sign Alliance and the Compassion Games, the survival of the kindest. We are in the MLK 40 Days of Peace. So the Compassion Games has been blessed with a grant from AmeriCorps to support and honor the legacy and the wisdom of Dr. King. It began with a celebration of his birth and the day of service in January and goes for 40 days to the end of February. And what a time to find ourselves listening to, learning from, being inspired by the words of Dr. King. And we're really fortunate today because we're blessed to have the presence here of a very, very wise, beautiful soul and dear friend, Jonathan Granoff, who's the president of the Global Security Institute and a representative to the United Nations of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, has offered up his time to come do what we're calling a teach-in. There are many, many views about what we need to do now. But like Dr. King said, we're either going to all come together and learn how to live together as brothers and sisters here, or we're going to perish as fools. And in my lifetime, I've never seen it more serious. There's so many challenges that we're facing. And the idea of human security. And what does that really mean? This is the topic that we're looking to you, Jonathan, to share with us. So the format here is I'm going to disappear and allow you to share with us on the MLK's timeless wisdom and human security today. And then we'll open it to those who are in the room with us here to interact with you a little bit. And I'm grateful to you, Jonathan. Thank you for your heart and your soul and your spirit and the amount of work you do every day in support of all of us. I'm lucky that I know you well enough to know how true that is. You wouldn't seek the recognition, but boy, it's so well deserved. So Becky, hide me and let's let Jonathan introduce himself and what he's offering to us as a teaching on MLK's timeless wisdom and human security today.
Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you for the respond that you made to the call of love in your heart to help us move from love of self to selfless love, which is interestingly, Dr. King, as you will hear, points out, is part of the way of knowing reality. It's so amazing that he goes from, in his own witness to responding to this call, the witness of a human being responding to the call of conscience, from the lunch counters to the buses, to integrating buses, to addressing labor strikes, to voter registration, to addressing national poverty, to addressing the scourge of war, to addressing the madness of the use of science to build weapons of mass destruction, to opening the tent to all those who have love in their hearts and pursue truth, and then to the unity of the human family. That his political trajectory is exactly the strategy that we have to take, to go from the particular, to keep opening the tent, to bring more and more people who care about our own personal and collective humanity to be able to work together. Rather than moving toward identity over principle, rather than identification with nation, race, religion, gender, age, high or low, but rather listen to the words and wisdom of Martin Luther King that I'll be able to share today. His strategy is timeless because it's rooted in the knowledge that comes from that love that is the gift of the Creator that makes us human. But I'm going to start out with something from a wise person that I'm not kind of completely in agreement with. Because by training, I'm a lawyer, and we like to make very fine distinctions. Albert Einstein, certainly a wise man, said, "The unleashing of the power of the atom has changed everything except our mode of thinking, and thus we head toward unparalleled catastrophes." Well, the kind of thinking that we need to adopt isn't really new. By implication, one would think he's calling for a new thinking, and that's the distinction I'm making. It's not a new thinking that's needed. It's a very ancient thinking. The ancient Upanishads, one of the most ancient spiritual scriptures we have, says the world is one family. The world is one family. And obviously, the ethical implication of that is to treat your neighbor as yourself if you understand that in modernity, neighborhood is not a physical location, it's a moral location. Because today, as never before in human history, this admonition of the wise to see the human family as one, which is a precondition for spiritual awakening, that's what the Upanishads is about. Or the golden rule found in every spiritual tradition in some iteration, is a spiritual admonition, has become a practical necessity. For not only has the splitting of the atom created a new situation, but the way we heat our homes. 150 years ago, if somebody said, let's get together and figure out how to melt the polar ice cap and change the viability of the regenerative processes of nature to sustain humanity, let's figure out how to destroy the biosystem of the planet. Any person with common sense would have said that's beyond our capacity. We can't melt the polar ice cap. We can't change the pH of the oceans that provides the 50% of our oxygen through the health of phytoplankton. We can't burn down the rainforest, which is the third lung that we all share. We don't have the ability to do that. 150 years ago, we didn't have the ability to do that. But we're doing that. We're doing it. And we're doing it because we're putting greed, we're putting our self-interest of nation, race, religion, gender, etc., before our common humanity. And Dr. King, as you will hear, is calling for us to have a change of heart and a change of perspective that's rooted in ancient wisdom from time immemorial. But even decades ago, before we were so aware of climate change, before we were in the crisis that we're in with the threat of nuclear annihilation, he was making the point that this transformation is not only needed for our survival, but it's needed for each of us to recover the fullness of our humanity. And you will now, the UN has a campaign called Human Security for All that I'm pleased to be a big supporter of. And it arises from a General Assembly resolution calling for support of human security. And you'll hear the human security call in Dr. King's words when I share them with you. But human security is a security that focuses on people. Freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom from indignity. Those are the three criteria of it. But it really is about a clean, sustainable environment, useful education, secure jobs, fulfilling culture, stable communities, health, nourishing food, the flourishing that comes from freedom of worship, conscience, human rights, and the rule of law. And these needs require safe neighborhoods and a culture of peace. Juxtaposed with the extraordinary expenditures on military nationalism, 32 trillion since 2000, the world has spent. And the most absurd expenditures of nuclear weapons, which the more we perfect, the less security we get. And another aspect of human security is to listen to the words of the Secretary General. We cannot continue our war against nature. Nature will always win. We have to live in harmony with each other and with nature. And human security is the framework that can help this, the framework of thinking that can help change the dangerous policy that we have. So I want to quote directly from Dr. King words that I think are so timeless and relevant today, and so in accord with universal, spiritually verifiable principles that you can try them in your own life and see whether they work. You can experiment. List. So I'm just, you hear so much about Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, but there's more that he had to say. By the way, if you Googled, I did a dialogue with Clarence Jones, who was his lawyer and speechwriter. He helped Dr. King with his speeches. And I would commend that to your attention if you just Googled me and Clarence Jones. And Clarence Jones emphasized this principle of universality that was really driving Dr. King, this because he experienced that love that comes from God, that is without borders. He had a heart that didn't have any borders. And today, look, we have a virus that doesn't have any borders. But we have militaries that all have borders, and we have nations striving to annex other countries and do away with their uniqueness, tell them what to do. We do need borders. We do need cities. We do need nations. We do need religions. We do need identity. These are tools, though. Nations are tools. They're not ends in themselves. For what are they tools? They're tools to help us become human and live in peace. Dr. King said in his noble lecture of December 11th, 1964, "Our problem today is that we've allowed the internal to become lost to the external. We've allowed the means whereby we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. So much of our modern life can be summarized in that arresting dictum of the poet Thoreau. Improved means to an unimproved end. This is the serious predicament, the deep and haunting problem confronting modern man. If we are to survive today, our moral and spiritual lag must be eliminated. Enlarged material powers spell enlarged peril if there is not proportionate growth of the soul. When the without of man's nature subjugates the within, dark storm clouds begin to form in the world." The without always deals with the how and can obviously forget the why, the improved means to an unimproved end. If you forget the why, you end up with law without justice, medicine without healing, art without beauty, philosophy without truth, financial systems and not about providing goods and services for people, religion without love and transcendence, based just dogs, rituals, rites, practices, and weapons. The more you perfect, the less security you get. We have to come back to the reasons why, and that comes from the internal. That comes from our hearts. That comes from our humanity. So much of our pursuits now reinforce separation and ultimately violence. Dr. King said in his Nobel speech, Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends up defeating itself. If the goal is security and peace, the pursuit of violence, he is saying, is not the way of obtaining it. And then he says, well, it's interesting. I'll quote from his guru, his teacher, his political teacher that he attributed so much to, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi said, do I still adhere to my faith in truth and nonviolence? Has not the atomic bomb exploded that faith? Not only has it not done so, but it has clearly demonstrated to me that the twins, nonviolence and truth, constitute the mightiest force in the world. Before it, the atomic bomb is of no effect. The two opposing forces are wholly different in kind. The one moral and spiritual, the other physical and material. The one is infinitely superior to the other, by which its very nature has an end. The force of the spirit is ever progressive and endless. Its full expression makes it unconquerable in the world. In saying this, I know I've said nothing new. I merely bear witness to the fact. What is more, that force resides in everybody, man, woman, and child, irrespective of the color of the skin. Only in the many it lies dormant, but it is capable of being awakened by judicious training. It is further observed that without the recognition of this truth and due efforts to realize it, there's no escape from self-destruction. The remedy lies in every individual training himself for self-expression in every walk of life, irrespective of response by neighbors. And Dr. King did that. And he was a witness to the power that comes from that commitment. It is truly miraculous and transcends intellectual understanding. But he changed the world. He changed the world. And these truths can change each of us in wonderful ways. Let me continue with words of Dr. King. Recent events, wow. I mean, talk about prophetic words. Recent events have vividly reminded us that nations are not reducing, but rather increasing their arsenals of weapons of mass destruction. The best brains in the highly developed nations of the world are devoted to military technology. The proliferation of nuclear weapons has not been halted in spite of the limited test ban treaty. The fact that most of the time human beings put the truth about the nature and risks of nuclear war out of their minds because it's too painful and not acceptable does not alter the nature and risks of such a war. The device of rejection may temporarily cover up anxiety, but it does not bestow peace of mind and emotional security. There may have been a time when war served as a negative good by preventing the spread and growth of an evil force, but the destructive power of modern weapons eliminated even the possibility that war may serve as a negative good. If we assume that life is worth living and that man has a right to survive, then we must find an alternative to war. In a day when vehicles hurtle through outer space and guided ballistic missiles carve highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can claim victory in war. A so-called limited war will leave little more than a calamitous legacy of human suffering, political turmoil, and spiritual disillusionment. A world war, God forbid, will leave only smoldering ashes as a mute testimony of our human race whose folly led inexorably to ultimate death. So if modern man, continues to flirt unhesitatingly with war, he will transform his earthly habitat into an inferno such that even the mind of Dante could not imagine. I do not wish to minimize the complexity of the problems that need to be faced in achieving disarmament and peace, but I think it is a fact that we shall not have the will, the courage, and the insight to deal with such matters unless in this field we are prepared to undergo a mental and spiritual reevaluation, a change of focus, which will enable us to see that the things which seem most real and powerful are indeed now unreal and have come under the sentence of death. We need to make a supreme effort to generate the readiness, indeed the eagerness, to enter the new world which is now possible, the city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. It's not enough to say we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. We've inherited a big house, a great world house, in which we have to live together. Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentiles and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, Muslims and Hindu, a family unduly separated by ideas, culture, and interest, who, because we can never again live without each other, must learn somehow in this one big world to live with each other. This means that more and more our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. This is human security. We must now give an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole in order to preserve the best in our individual societies. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all men. And I know he meant humanity, not gender. He continued, when I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental and weak response, which is little more than emotional bosh. I am speaking of that force which all the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. That's not a dream. He's talking about the key which unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. That's a truth assertion of the highest order, a way of knowing, not just with the tools of intelligence and mind, but a way of knowing that includes the fullness of the heart, wherein the light of the soul can be found. And I'm not talking about the emotional, physical heart. I'm talking about the deeper heart. As Dr. Jane Goodall often says, the real journey we have to make, when people say, oh, you travel so much, you travel 200 days a year to remind us to protect each other and the planet. And she said, no, the real journey is from here to here. And here she means the heart, the center of our humanity. And I would say to my brothers and sisters listening, there's another step in the journey that's needed today, which is from the head to the heart to the hand. To the hand. Because the heart that's not brought into action. I'm talking to people who are still closeted, who haven't come out. People who really believe in the power of compassion and the power of love. Come out. Bring it into action. Don't be shy. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Don't refrain from talking about the importance of justice and love and compassion in the public sphere. Spare me the idealism that says the status quo can continue and burn the planet. Spare me the realism that says we can thieve from the poor and hungry and build more weapons of mass destruction. Spare me the so-called realism of oppression and injustice. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. And then Dr. King says, I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. It's a wonderful story of wisdom of a teenager, typical. Most teenagers, I certainly was like that when I was testosterone driven, not wise, but a wise guy. And he and his friends go to a wise man in a village and say, I have a bird behind my back. Is it alive or dead? And the wise man knows that if he says that it's dead, he'll pull the bird out and it'll fly away. If he says it's alive, the boy will snap its neck and say, see, it's dead. So the answer is, the bird of the future is in your hands. Dr. King says, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. You know, we can look at our commitments based on different metrics. If you look at the commitment of Socrates, who gave up his life to promote the rule of law in his society, which is the foundation that allows us to have this discussion. Because without the rule of law, John, we would be in jail. We are protected in this country of the United States for its good and its bad. We have the rule of law. The rule of law stood up in the last election, and the way the media says, oh, you can believe Donald Trump or believe the Democrats, that's not the case. That's not the issue. The issue is 60 court cases said that the election was legitimate. Because of the rule of law, we can have this discussion. Socrates was judged by 500 of his countrymen guilty. All he did was ask questions. These questions were powerful. Questions can be very powerful. And he challenged their superstitions. He showed people that they didn't know what they were talking about most of the time. They got angry because of it. And then in his society, the rule of law was pretty weak. He wanted to strengthen it. So he could have escaped from his cell. His students came the night before he was to drink hemlock and die. But he said, no, I'll drink the hemlock. The rule of law has been misapplied to me, but it's important for the community. I'll give up my life for that. And you tell me whether, if you looked at his conduct based on metrics of management by objective, short-term measurable goals, was he successful? His act spawned the civilization that we live in today. He was a pillar of that. Or take Jesus. Jesus tells us, by the time the cock crows, you'll all forget me. So our metrics have to be based on the kind of thinking that Dr. King is giving us here. This is the timeless wisdom. This is the wisdom of the Upanishads. This is the wisdom of the Bible and the Quran. This is the wisdom of our humanity. And then Dr. King says, I believe, and I agree with him, I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, today, there's still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted from the dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity and equality and freedom for their spirits. I believe what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I believe with the help of each, which is a gift in our hands to choose, and the help of God, which is a gift surely granted to those whose hearts are open, that we can realize and become the change that we want to see. We can and will realize ourselves as the heirs of this tradition of timeless wisdom if we make the commitment, if we make it the intention, and if we make that journey from here to here to here. The heart without the hand will wither into mere sentiment. And the hand, not guided by the heart of love, can be very dangerous. But when the two come together, a life of affliction, disappointment, betrayal, suffering, self-centeredness, loneliness is the consequence. Tears of salt can be turned into tears of joy and gratitude. Trust me, this isn't new. This is the change that we have to make. This is what Einstein meant by our thinking has to change. This isn't new thinking. This transcends thinking. This is called wisdom. And that wisdom is grounded in love, compassion, tolerance, equality, justice, peacefulness. And it is not responsive to anger, falsehood, jealousy, pride, vanity, prejudice, injustice, oppression, and the pursuit of selfish power. And if you look at these two dynamics, one of them reaffirms the illusion of separation, and the other affirms the reality of unity. Unity with each other is the same principle as unity with the soul. The great Sufi Saint Bawa Muhaiyaddin said, separate from yourself that which separates you from others. And let me just finish these reflections with some quotes. I started with a quote from Einstein. I'll give you another quote from Einstein. O youth, do you know that yours is not the first generation to yearn for a life full of beauty and freedom? Do you know that all your ancestors have felt the same as you do and fell victim to trouble and hatred? Do you know also that your fervent wishes can only find fulfillment if you succeed in attaining a love and understanding of people and animals and plants and stars, so that every joy becomes your joy and every pain becomes your pain? That's Albert Einstein's insight. Sadi, the 13th century poet. The human family is one body with many parts, creations arising from one unseen essence. Any harm to any part summons an awakening, a dis-ease, and a healing response from all parts. You who fail to feel the pain of others cannot be called fully, truly, completely human. So this reflection on the words of Dr. King is a reflection of timeless, powerful, nourishing, empowering, reminding truth. As Socrates said, wisdom is remembered. It's something from the soul. In many spiritual practices, it's uncovering the natural self that every one of us came into this world with and responded to our mother with love. With love, we responded to love because we came with love. When Alexander the Great died and they carried his body, he had his hand, it said his hands were empty. He wanted to make the point, I came empty, I'm leaving empty. He didn't just come empty, he came with open arms. Infants come with a responsiveness to love and an inquiring, what is this about? Who am I? Where did I come from? Where will I go? And as Martin Luther King said, if you want the answer to that question, where did I come from? Why am I here? Where will I go soon when this body decomposes? He said, in his Nobel speech that this love that he's talking about is the key to understanding that ultimate reality. That ultimate reality that brought us into the world, that sustains this very breath that we all share and to which we will return.
Hmm.
So let's heed some of the words of the wise. In this time of forgetfulness, let us be the people that remember. And as Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell said in their famous manifesto, remember your humanity, forget the rest.
Wow. God, Jonathan, I love you so. I know everyone is feeling that right now, that this is a gift that you've given us. You know, I think in one of those moments you were sharing, Dr. King, you talked about will and courage and insight. You've given us that insight, brother. Now, how we react, how we relate, what we're doing in our own small way here is looking to breathe life into the vision, not only for our own individual development, but truly to build a beloved community here. It's so urgent right now. So a couple thoughts came to me as I was listening. And first off, I know I'm going to listen to what you had to say again and again. I think everyone else feels that. And part of what we're doing here, you know, we're sharing this out on many other members' pages. Many people need to hear what you just spoke. The way you brought King's vision and words to this moment in time is so essential for us. So in that spirit of building beloved community, we want to be advocates for human security for all, for the campaign that you're talking about. Your leadership and the way that you do it so beautifully with love and compassion, and yet the fierce reality of the need for that right now. It's like King was saying, it's not about just the emotional love. This is about love as a force to awaken us at this time. So talk to me and talk to us a little bit about the campaign for human security for all, and do it in a way that shows us where can we be advocates, where can we get in to make this point at this time in support of your work?
Hmm. Well, first I want to respond. There's no such thing as a small or large effort for virtue because uh, because uh, there's no disconnection between any of us. So every act of virtue is part of the fabric of the whole. And perspective is based on sort of perspective. So a couple of kings were looking at a bunch of ant colonies. From the perspective of the ant colony, the main ant is like God, he's got his kingdom. In the perspective of nations, there's presidents, they've got a little kingdom, but they can't, most of them can't even control themselves. So the kingdom that you first have to control is the kingdom of yourself, the kingdom of your own mind, the kingdom of your heart, the kingdom of your qualities. So that, you know, that is a big deal.
Right.
But the things that we manifest and the way in we manifest that, that's often beyond our providence and skill. It's certainly beyond our skill. The providence of where you're going to exercise virtue and goodness is outside of your gift or my gift. Giving somebody a glass of water, giving somebody a glass of water with love might be a bigger deal than writing a treaty. We just don't know.
Mhm.
So there's no scale for virtue because virtue is sovereign. Love in action, which is what another way of describing virtue, love in action is immeasurable. It can't be measured. So it doesn't have big or small. So people think, oh, well, I'm just small. No, no, you make yourself available for love, but not love of things, not love of ideas, doctrines, identity, things we create, nations, but love of the majesty of creation and the web of life itself, and love of the Creator that mysteriously creates each of us, only discoverable within ourselves.
Hmm.
And so, Human Security for All, there will be a website real soon that we're going to have up and going with that we're doing with the UN. And I will tell you, John, how to get that. This is new. It came about. It's a joint program with the World Academy of Arts and Science, which is like each nation has an Academy of Science. But Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein and Joseph Rotblat. Joseph Rotblat was one of the founders of the World Academy. He won a Nobel Prize. Why? He walked off the Manhattan Project, an act of virtue that the world hardly recognized for years. Very difficult life he had because of that. Why did he do it? Because unbeknownst to the public, there was a heavy water facility that the Germans had up in Norway that was necessary for them to make an atomic bomb. And the British and Norwegian Secret Service blew it up, and Hitler couldn't make the bomb. And Rotblat was a British citizen, so when he found out about it, he went to Groves, who was running the Manhattan Project, and said, "Don't build the atomic bombs.
Hmm.
The Nazis can't do it." But so much money had been put into it that they felt they had to do it, and then they used it, and now we have thousands of them ready to go off, and we're all at risk. But he won the Nobel Prize for it. And so they decided that there needed to be an organization that had brilliant scientists, but people of the humanities, ethicists, philosophers, lawyers, etc. And I'm a fellow and trustee in it. So I'm part of this program, Human Security for All. And there's a human security trust in the UN system. People don't know about this. And there was a General Assembly resolution that all the nations of the world agreed that we should utilize a human security perspective and look at all of the issues that require a human security perspective. All of the weaponry in the world can't protect us from pandemics.
Right.
Can't protect the climate. Can't protect the rainforest. Can't protect the health of the oceans. Can't stop the destruction of biodiversity, the web of life that is the Holy Scripture that we depend upon. The obsession with nationalism is an end in itself rather than a tool. We think easily, okay, I live in Cleveland. Cleveland's important. It's a city. It's part of Ohio. It's not against Ohio. It's part of Ohio. It's not against Ohio. And Ohio is part of the United States. It's not against Mississippi or New York. It's part of the United States. And the United States is part of the world. It doesn't have to be against each other.
Yeah.
We need a radical change in thinking fast. And yes, there are conflicts that might require self-defense, but we need the compass point. We need the ought. The ought, the power of ought. Let me just digress for 1 second on the power of ought. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. When that was said, it didn't include any women. It didn't include indigenous people, it didn't include people of color. It didn't even include white men who didn't have property. But the understanding from which that statement came, that all lives are equal, that all of us have moral agency, that all of us are equal, has evolved into an ought. And even the worst of tyrants pay the price of hypocrisy for it. But wherein that justice that arises from caring for other lives as equal to one's own, where that is alive, societies flourish. That's why democracy is so important. That's why fundamental freedoms and human rights are so important, because they not only are the right thing to do, they're the practical thing to do. Because if you try to suppress human rights in the pursuit of security, you'll end up with neither of them, neither human rights nor security. Oppression leads to more suffering. Freedom leads to peace and justice. So we're forming our website at this point, but the Consumer Technology Association's it's the largest conference on the planet, just took place in Las Vegas of all places, over 115,000 people, and they made human security the central theme of the conference.
No.
Adding to all of the major technology companies, Sony, Microsoft, Apple, Samsung, they were all there. I was there, and saying, look, technology can be used for goodness, but you need to have that as part of the DNA of your culture and your country and your company and your company. What does it mean to mainstream a concept? Okay, so 70 years ago, if we talked about addressing gross disparities of wealth on the planet, we'd only talk about GDP. But today we talk about sustainable development. And some cynical people say, well, these intentions don't mean much, nobody does it. That's not true. I mean, we may not like the system of China, but they did pull several 100 million people out of abject poverty in one generation. Not a small undertaking. Are they promoting individual liberty and freedom? I don't think so. Could they possibly do it? More likely than not, because it doesn't come from governments. The quest for freedom, the quest for human dignity, the quest for justice never comes from governments. It comes from us. It comes from humans pursuing human security, civil rights, human rights, gender equity, environmental protection. All of these virtuous movements come from the people. They never, ever come from governments. Governments are conservative institutions by nature. Has to come from the people. So this change of human security, well, if you Google it I've written a lot about it. There's an article I just did in Horizons magazine on human security. The Global Security Institute, we have stuff on it. The World Academy of Arts and Science has stuff on it. But we will be promoting, with your help, John, this campaign.
Yeah. Well, okay. So look, like Dr. King said, right? Those who love peace need to organize as effectively as those who love war. The fact that that was put at the center of that conference in Vegas is essential. It's wonderful to hear, but nobody knew about it. It's not common knowledge.
Whoa.
It's not
No,
common
no.
knowledge. It's not. Wait, let me, Jonathan, hold it. I want to help you here. I want to help all of us here.
Yeah.
Because I think anyone listening to you realizes you are headed in the right direction. We need to learn, I think, new patterns of how we advocate for each other, how we learn from each other, how we are influenced by each other. So it's not just changing our thinking, but our speaking and our actions in creative ways, new creative ways, because it does come from the people. We have this medium here. We are building a beloved community. We're attempting to actually demonstrate by our actions exactly everything you're teaching us here, okay? So I just want to make the point about what it's going to take for us to nurture our collective intelligence. Because I think everyone listening to you says, oh my God, I have access to a really influential, brilliant person who gets me, who understands I as an individual want to be free. I want that love, and I want it as a powerful force in the world. So with the knowledge we'll gain from knowing you and access to what's happening, we really want our actions to be effective. Actually, so we have this 40-day window we're doing, and we have a convergence happening at the end of February. We've been blessed with this grant for the next 3 years to honor Dr. King. We know that the situation is crazy right now. We're actually reading in the paper about nuclear annihilation, Armageddon. These words are being used in ways that, we only heard about in the past, like at the Cuban Missile Crisis, but we're talking about today. This is the urgency, and that fierce urgency now is so present for me. So I want to give us, in the space we have, there's a couple of amazing folks in the room who may want to have a chance to interact with you, Jonathan. I know you only have limited time, but I promise you this, that this will not be for naught, that this time spent with you here and the vision for human security for all is ours to carry with you. and learning how to stand together and turning these strategies and what we have into what we need is my life's work and the work of so many of us who are part of this alliance. Blessings on you, brother. Good health to you. Really, it's just such a gift for us to hear. And anyone who wants to share and interact here, we've got a little bit of time. I'll invite you to raise your hand. I know, Brother Phil, you're here. You just gave this amazing teaching. We're calling these teach-ins, where we're really stopping to learn from each other and listen to each other. And Brother Phil brought the indigenous perspective on our current situation, nuclear war or peace on earth, you know. And Chief Perry, you're here. Anyone else who'd like to speak, you're welcome to. Right. I think they may be stunned like I was. Who's got their hand up? Right. Chief Perry does. Fabulous. Hey, dear brother.
Here.
Get you unmuted. There you go.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you, Jonathan, on such an insightful position. And you did mention a number of times from the mind to the hand. But one of the things that Dr. King did and did most effectively was inspire positive action to counterbalance what was going on at the time. And yes, there was a lot of violence. Today, we are losing our democracy through the manipulation of syntax. And we don't have them. What can we do to develop a collective action going forward, a movement, if you might? It sounds like a negative term in these days. What can we build and do daily to ensure that the ideals of freedom and peace and love goes forward? Because just to walk that sort of shining path, I often said, meditation's fine, prayer is good. I don't want to be shot in the back of the head because you're praying. I want to know what it is we can do collectively to build the love going forward in a tactile manner. Thank you.
Well, ask your questions.
Well, no, it's a great question, and I want to answer it honestly, which it is, when we say we, I know what you're talking about. There is a sense of a political movement of some kind, maybe a third party, or pressuring our political representatives to act more in accord with these values, asking every political candidate, what are you doing to protect the climate? What are you doing to end poverty? What are you doing to get rid of nuclear weapons? This is what the Nobel Peace Laureate said every political candidate should have to answer. And then, of course, I think this is a time in which we need to start talking strategically and have leaders of different coalitions and communities come together and have constructive debate as to the best strategies to go forward, not just to express sentiment, but to engage in critical analysis. I think we saw very recently two important movements expressing proper sentiment, Me Too and Black Lives Matter. But they have not ripened into the power to make the political changes needed to bring the sentiments behind these movements into action. So our strategies, we need to start having strategic dialogue amongst the different sectors that care. And I think that one of the things that John is doing is encouraging people to recognize that they're not alone in these feelings for peace and justice, that there is a community. John, when you said no one knew, well, 115,000 people were there. And in terms of coverage, it was enormously covered, but it was covered in trade publications. Intentionally, that was where we were focused. But there's different sectors. And Chief Perry raises the issue of how can we the first question is, do we work within the political parties? Obviously, the Republican Party right now is not a political party. It's a cult centered around a very strange, narcissistic character. So it's not a political party. The Democratic Party has so many different voices and so many directions going in it that it's hard to determine what are its actual principles and policies. But it's a political party. But I think this is a time, depending on where you are in what skills you have, I actually believe very strongly in the power of intention. This is a strange thing to say for a lawyer to say, but my experience has been that when you make it your intention to bring these qualities into action, events conspire to find ways for them to become manifest. So for me, I'm trained in the law, so I work in that level of participation, institutional change at a fairly high level. You know, the United Nations system. I'm the permanent observer representative for the International Anti-Corruption Academy. That's one of the roles that I have. So I'm engaged in promoting democracy, human rights, good governance as international principles. But I didn't seek that. What I did do was I've been seeking, I'm up in my 70s, and I've spent a large part of my life working on character, prayer, meditation, the things that you talked about, Chief Perry, but more importantly, developing skills that could be of service to others. And then asking the Great Spirit to give me the opportunity to express those. That's the most important thing, is every individual doing that. But in terms of political strategy, I think that we're very much in the world where the world was in the 1640s. In the 1640s, there weren't nations yet. And there was massive destruction of Protestants and Catholics in Europe slaughtering each other. And they had to stop it, because they were killing each other in the name of God. And nations were created. But before the councils of Westphalia, which created modern states, there was a time of real debate and dialogue. And that's where we are right now. We need strategic discussions.
Yeah.
So I don't have, very simply, I don't have a simple answer other than process.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to add, though. I have some good news to you, Chief Perry, because we do have this new medium for connecting. That it isn't like it's before Westphalia, because we're no longer defined by where we are, right? It's what's bringing us together. And Brian Eno, in a paper I read recently, said there's two key moments in the social movement. There's the first moment when everybody realizes that things aren't working. The second moment is when everybody realizes that everybody's realizing things aren't working. And we are at that moment. And the question you're asking is exactly right. And that's where I think the strategies that we're focusing on are how do we turn what we have into what we need? How do we influence power and change? And the good news is that the citizen is rising, the global citizen, who's using creativity and swarm creativity and collective intelligence. That's what we're going to do here. We're attempting to live the way exactly you're pointing to, Chief Perry. So you're not sitting there alone. Any of us are sitting there alone, wondering what the hell am I really going to do, but are creating opportunities for us to connect, to strategically, tactically, and operationally bring about the change. I really do think it's our moment. I think everybody knows that too. And therefore, you putting that question on the table, just like Jonathan said earlier, Socrates, the power of those questions, right? Hey guys, what are we really going to do here? We just going to all sit alone and meditate and be at peace? Or how are we going to actually weave our strategies together? That's what this teachings are about. That's why we're using this 40 days to do it. And thank you for surfacing that.
And everybody can engage, right now where they are. But you were asking a larger question. By the way, Chief Perry, who's your congressman?
Lawler. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congressman Lawler. And I just had one tiny suggestion to go along with this marvelous new freedom that Jonathan and all of you are bringing here. It's unstoppable. Is that perhaps something we can put into this bag of going forward? Is I always tell people, share with people, that kindness is the answer to someone's prayer. It can be as simple as picking up a handkerchief for an elderly lady or anything else. But I would just encourage everybody to take some form of physical action going forward to say, yes, we are humanity and we're walking together.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I was only asking because I mean, I didn't. It's another sort of discourse to talk about how to bring these values into action. And I didn't. I mean, and there's policies that I think that we can advance simple things like live up to our treaty commitments to eliminate nuclear weapons pursuant to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, take the weapons off of alert. We didn't even have a debate over the $1 trillion in the budget. There was no partisan, nobody debated the extraordinary expenditures on these weapons of mass destruction that we're still funding. I mean, we're very far behind the eight ball in the political process right now. President Biden ran in his campaign on a no first use of nuclear weapons ticket. That was part of his policy, that the sole purpose of nuclear weapons is to prevent them from being used. But it hasn't become policy because there's no political pressure on that. So I think I reiterate, it's time for for us to have strategic discussions. How can we organize more effectively? That's
Yeah.
but
Well,
mainly it is how do we make a universal principle of love, of feeling the hurt of others, compassion, of seeing the centrality of bringing loving kindness and compassion into action, the guiding organizing principle that we come together. That's what Dr. King was calling us for. That's what's needed. And my sister, Reverend Petra Toms, yes, please, dear, please. No, we can't hear you.
you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, unmute.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Oh,
Okay, thank you. Yes. Hi, Chief Perry. How are you? And thank you so much for the wisdom that you were sharing that speaks so much to my heart, and I know certainly Chief Perry's heart in terms of, the wisdom of Dr. King. I just want to add one term in particular that we've discussed, and that is the term to decolonize. I think when I think of Dr. King's efforts, it is the mindset of decolonization. It is the mindset of who and where we are and how we have been and why we exist through the wisdom of indigenous peoples that has been prior to contact, and certainly has been the wisdom of indigenous people in Europe prior to those wars that you were talking about. The connection to the land, the responsibility to recognize all relatives as sacred, all relatives as sacred. It changes the paradigm. I think when you had mentioned, the two political parties, or the one cult and the other working at being a party and being in so many different places, because hierarchy and patriarchy has created such a vast umbrella that there's so many factions that need to be addressed. Under the umbrella of decolonization, all of those issues would be addressed. All of those needs, all of what we are crying out for would be addressed. And so, when I think of it, Dr. King really would be asking for us to step up if he were alive today. And certainly his thinking around gender, he wouldn't be using, all male pronouns and so forth. But his mindset was beyond the language that he was using, and understanding the need to reach everyone and every corner of the earth. So if we think of what it would mean to decolonize, it gives us a beginning place for our actions, for a way for us all to be safe with each other. Because we would be putting down our weapons and we would be having an open hand for each other and for the care of each other as relatives.
This was a good policy principle you've laid out. And I want to go back to Dr. King's political mentor, Mahatma Gandhi. And this would be a way of operationalizing it. Gandhi said, if you're looking at a policy, imagine the most disenfranchised person you've ever seen, the most oppressed person you've ever seen, the most hungry person you've ever seen. And think, will this policy be a benefit or burden to them? And that criteria goes right to the heart of the matter. Because in the process of colonization, which is the expression of oppression, there's going to be a lot of such people. Because part of colonization is a small group or one person telling everybody else who they have to be. And it's usually being pretty boring and stupid and lonely and not being free. Jesus said the same thing in Matthew. What you do to the least amongst you, you do to me.
Absolutely.
I'd like to end with a quote from a great Sufi that really awakened me to being one with all. And so this was not, I mean, John, you asked me to talk about the deeper principles of the wisdom of Martin Luther King, not his political strategy, which is really wise. I mean, he was politically very effective too, and I mean, but he was guided. I mean, you read his letter from the jail, he was guided by a higher power, and that's what this is, beloved community, that you're putting together are people who recognize there's something beyond our intellects, beyond our minds, that guides us. And that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of people who know this, who are just hiding it, who know that there is a spirit of guidance that's always connected to mystery, but the mystery is not shrouded in darkness. The mystery is shrouded in love and light. The more you go toward the mystery, the humbler you get, the more humble you get, the more open you are. And the more open you are, the more grace you can get. So Baba Muhyiddin said, if each of you will open your heart, your action, your wisdom, and your conduct, and look within, you'll see that every face is your face. All sorrow is your sorrow. When that state develops inside you, that's God's love. If that love develops, you will not hurt any other living thing. You will not ever cause pain. You will not reject any life. You will not torture any other life. I would add, you will not colonize any other life. Because if you hurt anyone, it will hurt you. There's a lot of people listening who know this truth. And I'm just saying, let's all come out. Let's come out and put love first and let the world know that's what we're about. And let our politics flow from there. I'm not ashamed to say we don't have to have all the answers, but we have to have the compass. We need the tuning fork. We need the direction. And we can't minimize the wisdom because it's not measurable. Because don't become instrumentalists that we have to see measurement right away. Dr. King was not guided by measurement. Jesus, Buddha, Socrates, Muhammad, not guided by measurement, guided by principle. And we're people of faith. We know that these principles of wisdom have power.
Yeah.
More powerful than we are. They brought us these principles, the principle of divine love and blessing brought us into this world. We didn't. We are the recipients of it.
Right.
And everybody is. And that's what decolonization, the first step is to realize that people have been, their brains, their minds, their aspirations have been artificially imposed on them by market forces, by tyranny, by ignorance. And we're saying, wait a minute, there is a divine power that guides your life. You can find it. You can find it, but you've got to make that the intention.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have, and that is our intention. And thank you, Reverend, for bringing that powerful thought to the table. Part of this beloved community is a safe enough place where we can realize how we have been colonized, so we can accept responsibility for ways of thinking that we didn't even know were thinking us, and ways of being that we didn't realize were being us in a way that's kept us separate and causes the situation we face. Jonathan, one of the things we're doing called Tales of Synergy from our magic canoe. I want to be a part with others to write that tale of synergy behind human security for all.
There you got a big yes for this, and you're going to be overwhelmed soon, and that's the way you want to be.
I want to ask.
A tsunami of best practices and ways people can get involved.
Yes,
This is
that's
the
what
beginning of, this is something that has been agreed by the nations of the world that it's needed, but the people have to know about it. And John, you're going to be instrumental in getting that message out. But I wanted to say the message is grounded in something deeper than politics.
Mm-hmm.
That's the secret sauce that's missing. The secret sauce that's missing in the transformation that we want to make is our faith in the power of this spiritual power that we know exists.
Right.
That's what's missing, and that's what we need to bring to the table.
Yep. And it's strategic, tactical, and operational. As you told the story of Dr. King and the influence and impact he had, then I get what Chief Perry is saying. I know he's impatient, as he should be, as we all should be. You know, this will not be just talk, because we're committed to it being not just talk. And that's, for me, what else can we do but organize, right? So we're going to really lean into what does that mean here? How do we embrace the vision that you have? How do we be advocates for each other? Chief Perry, you have your hand up there. Or was that just
I think one of the other things we need to be aware of is, because of our kindness and our aversion to any kind of conflict, which is wonderful, we need to find a way to be less passive. When we ignore and turn ourselves away from things that are distasteful, I'm not talking about fighting, I'm talking about not even giving a wink or a nod or et cetera. We are empowering all of the negativity we could find.
Yep.
So we need to stop with that, even if it's a joke on the side, but to let them know there's a displeasure, whoever they are, or whatever they are.
And within our own minds.
Exactly.
Because we all have that like whisperer that says, "Oh, you can't do this, or it's too ambitious, or who are you to do it?" No, you just, it's really liberating when you realize that all of us are hopeless. All egos stink. All minds are limited. And then the Buddha's first truth: everyone suffers. Everyone has affliction. If you're lucky, you get old age, sickness, and death. And everyone is in this boat together. It becomes a noble truth. When you see it, then you have compassion. And when you have compassion, you can be I had this experience. I was on the A train in New York, the subway. And I started looking at everybody and reflecting that just a few years ago, everyone on this car on the subway, the A train, it's perfect. Everyone in the car was just an infant. And very soon, they're all going to be in a bed passing away. And I'm with them in this car traveling together. And I really went deep in this meditation of the collective situation that we were all in. And all of a sudden, people started smiling at me on the subway. And I had this like epiphanous experience on the A train, because I was deeply meditating on our common situation, which is what compassion is about. And that's why this compassion. This was my compassion game, John. I was
Oh,
on the A train going uptown, engaging in the compassion game. Boy, did I get a good prize.
Yes, you're a superstar. And we got another one here is Laura Sa. Oh my gosh, what she's been up to, Jonathan, and who
Oh,
she is.
she's a gem.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful work she does.
Please unmute yourself there, Laura Sa. Let's see if
I have to go soon. I actually have
Let's do the last share, then we'll close.
Okay, thank you so much. It's an honor to and a blessing to be here today and to just have the focus on you, Jonathan. Hearing you speak in little brief increments throughout, World Unity Week and our Wednesday coming together with Brother Ben Bowler and John Raymer, it's always never enough. You've taken my opinion of attorneys to a whole nother sacred level. You're an amazing poet, strategist, a very visionary thinker, and again, I want to extend the invitation to you to participate as one of our featured speakers for an upcoming Peace Sunday program. John Raymer and Ben Bowler and Summer Raymer were featured yesterday for the incredible work that they are doing, Unity Earth, Sign Network, Compassion Games International. And so I would really love to have you featured in the program for Peace Sunday that's coming up on February 24th. It's focusing on the 1-year anniversary of the senseless, destructive war in Ukraine, but we will pre-record to make it easy and convenient for you. So at your convenience, sent you my phone number before, but let's connect truly and make this happen. I love everything that you shared. And I want to take it to the next level. You talk about love first, the universal principle of love. We know that love is the answer, right? But we're preaching to the choir. So what do we do to strategically help to elevate this we think it's common sense, but most people, are not resonating with this. So that's what I would really love for you to focus on. And also let's talk about what the Ukrainian President Zelensky has proposed for this Global Peace Formula Summit, which I know Brother John is very passionate about sharing, and also looking at the solutions that Chief Phil Lane Jr. has also proposed for a potential strategy to help end this war. I love that you stated, how important the power of intention is. When we truly are doing things from our heart and our hands, because we can think about it, we can talk about it, we can dream about it, but unless we have sacred engagement to take the necessary actions to make it come to fruition, really not enough will happen. Prayer, meditation, all of that is super important, but engagement is the next level to help to propel it forward. I would really love for us to start talking about what action steps can we do individually to create the world that we wish to see, and what can we all do collectively to make our intentions come to fruition. Peace Sunday 1982 was the very first one held here in Southern California at the Rose Bowl. 100,000 people. The music industry leaders, top singers, performers at that time were part of that amazing concert, and powerful speakers. I have a dream. Our theme back in 1982 was "We Have a Dream," honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. And our programs have continued every year. My organization, Unity and Diversity World Council and One Global Family Alliances, we have been given the opportunity to convene all the Peace Sunday gatherings. While serving in Ukraine for 2 months recently, I have a dream, and my team has a dream, to have the next major Peace Sunday concert, a Live Aid benefit concert there in Ukraine, to help the thousands of widowed mothers and orphan children and to help rebuild Ukraine. love to get you on that special speakers list when this is ready to happen. And we're starting to build the lineup of performers, singers, not only from Ukraine, but also from Russia and other neighboring countries, but definitely from America.
Right.
And so I would love to have you participate and really talk about universal principle of love. And also, let's talk about the Global Peace Formula Summit and what you said. We need to remember our humanity. We need to remember that we are one global family. We're not just to focus on the human relations, but our entire global relations with all of creation to honor our Creator. And like
Right.
Chief Bill Lane says, the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And you've expressed that beautifully today as well. So
Right. Larsa. Okay.
that,
Only because we're running out of time, right? And you've
oh,
put so much forward there
yeah.
that
I'd
you
love
should.
to hear him though.
No, I know. I want to hear him too. And just know before, because we are already in we're all these conflicting interpretations of what we do about Ukraine. We're right there. We're going to work this one out. But Jonathan, I'll let you respond. I know we only have a limited amount of time.
So, my dear sister, we need to talk bilaterally. And yes, I'm at your service. It's an honor, of course. But I actually have I have a call with the global communications at the UN that I have to be there
okay.
for on the subject that you raised, John, which is how do we amplify the positive message? I mean, that's a subject that I'm having with the people in the UN. Look, they're in a terrible bond. Just understand their situation. If the UN starts to really succeed, it becomes a partisan issue in the United States. And there are sectors in the United States that would like to see Ukraine lose, that don't want to fund their defense of their country. There are sectors in the United States that don't even want the UN to exist, that don't like the idea that the United States is part of the whole world. So we're in a very subtle moment, but I do think the choir needs to be harmonized and sing more loudly because we have a good song. And so my closing prayer is that the two prongs of the tuning fork of the heart are wisdom, which is that consciousness that can understand the nature of consciousness, which is light, which is what gives us touch, vision, hearing, taste, which gives us life. Wisdom can understand the sacredness of this heartbeat and the heartbeat of all others. Wisdom is grounded in the other prong of the tuning fork, which is love. And that tuning fork can be played by anybody in the orchestra. It's the most important instrument, not the piano, not the trumpet, the tuning fork. And this beloved community is composed of people who are making serious efforts in their prayers, in their inner work, to tune that harmonious place in their heart that is resonant with the Creator and all of the web of life of creation. May we be so attuned to that tuning fork of wisdom and love and resonate so that others can be harmonized as we're being harmonized. All praises are to that source that gives us life itself. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Beautiful, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chief Perry, and everybody listening. God bless you. I got to go.
All right, let you go. And let me tell you what we're doing, Larsa, in response to what you're saying, just to make everyone aware. And Becky, why don't you come on the screen as well? Because we realize exactly like you were saying, Larsa, situation right now, we need to come to some kind of peace agreement that's acceptable, that's credible, that's enforceable. The risk is so great right now. We are escalating a war, nuclear weapons. And what I've come to see, and that's why we're doing these teach-ins. Brother Phil gave an incredible teach-in on nuclear war or peace on earth, an indigenous perspective. We're about to release that. And we're inviting more voices, Audrey Kitagawa and Dot Maver. And we really, and we're calling them Pathways to Peace in Ukraine. And there are many conflicting interpretations. And Jim Garrison, who's another signed member, stepped forward and proposed this summit on Ukraine will be February 27th to March 3rd. Now, what we just did with Jonathan is the same thing we did with Jim, where we said, let's get behind what they're doing. One of the things I'm learning about these tales of synergy from our Magic Canoe is that our own pitching ourselves is hard to do. But when we pool together and one of us say, hey, I hear you, Jim Garrison, you're calling for a summit on Ukraine. Let's get behind that. Hey, I hear you, Jonathan Granoff, calling for human security for all. Let's get behind that. Let's learn what that really does mean to be in beloved community, to actually weave strategies together and take on the difficult challenges of coming to know and love each other and respect the differences. There are many conflicting interpretations. And the story, there's been an old pattern of getting us to believe, it's called enemy creation. And it's stuck in the right and wrong and assigning blame, and we lose empathy and compassion. So thank you, dear sister. You have so much to teach us. I invited you to do one of these teachings. Chief Perry, I'd like you to consider doing the same thing. We need to learn from each other. And you got it, Laura Sa. Little bits from each of us just isn't quite enough. We need to give a little bit of space and say, hey, we want to learn from you. Prepare and teach us. And I'm so glad that went so well. That was really beautiful. I'm really, really so grateful to you, Becky, and Chief Perry, to you showing up, and Laura Sal, the work you're doing. So let's close this session. But before we do, Becky, you want to share anything here? Thank you for your help and support.
Just so deeply grateful, and definitely want to schedule a teach-in, a peace up teach-in with Laura Sa and one with Chief Perry. There's so much wisdom here on that one fork of the tuning fork, as Brother Jonathan Granoff inspired us. I wish we had time to hear the second prong on the tuning fork. I've heard him talk about it before. It's so powerful.
See, we know each other.
Yeah.
We have access to each other. That's a huge asset. Our relatedness, the wisdom that we have. Now, how do we turn that into real change?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
Chief Perry's saying. How do we really build that as a movement? But we're in a new medium, and a new medium allows for new practices.
Yeah.
So this is available. People could share this. That teaching from Jonathan was extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And the wisdom of Dr. King is amazing. And we have access to that 40 days apiece to the convergence at the end of February, the 24th and 25th. We'd love everyone who's listening to consider, if you've got wisdom to share and how we're going to bring about the change that we need, we want to hear your voice.
Yes, we have a website, compassiongames.org, where you can see a schedule that is evolving between now and towards the end of February, which is our bookend convergence, the MLK Beloved Community Convergence, the 24th and 25th of February, Friday and Saturday. So you're invited to put forth your presentations and participation for that weekend as well through the website, compassiongames.org. And my heart is so full, and for me, hearing such wisdom of every time we're in these experiences, these sacred Zoom experiences where we're able to listen and feel and have an experience, I feel the best thing that I can do is to take time to hold and feel the polarities in myself when I hear things, and to take time to be present with how I'm feeling after I hear such wisdom, and to contemplate. And the very first thing that comes up for me is I feel hope and optimism when I hear these amazing gems of wisdom. And then because I feel that, I feel a tremendous responsibility for the human beings that I know that are suffering, who feel oppressed and not heard, or invalidated and hopeless and despair. So I feel a great responsibility when I have the privilege of hearing such light-filled, uplifting, peaceful inspiration. How do we reach people who don't feel that they're part of the solution, who feel lost, who feel hopeless? And we here are forming this in our community by sharing opportunities for people to come in the Zoom rooms and experience it. So I'm so grateful. And thank you, John, for how you share your vision, and we all evolve your vision, into how we communicate and share on each other's pages and do what we can to amplify hope, active hope, as Joanna Macy calls it. It's a verb.
Becky, that's so helpful. Thank you. Really getting personal about how do we take what we're hearing? How do we change our thinking, our speaking, our action? And again, you speak to exactly what Chief Perry was saying: acts of kindness and love and compassion, service. Dr. King said everybody could be great because everybody could serve. And that gives me so much joy. And I think that's part of the secret weapon in all of this, getting the attention off of ourselves. And especially now when there is so much pain in the world. And Dr. King, I have a little quote of his, one of my favorites, and I have this book of his quotes. The problem is that you're supposed to just put the tabs on your favorites, and it's almost every page has my favorites on it. But he says, nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for mankind to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to oppression and violence. Mankind must evolve for all human conflict, a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. Love wins. Love wins. So thank everyone for coming here. I want to show you one thing. There is on the Compassion Game site, if you go there, you can go to the site, you can go here to events. I say, let me see, if you look at all the past events here, this session's now considered the past event, and there'll be a link to it, the recording. We had another session yesterday with Ruben George, Sundance Chief Ruben George. This is the one that Phil did, integrate. They're all here, going back in time from what's been happening. It's going to be going for 40 days. It's compassiongames.org. There's a place if you want to participate that you can fill out that form and join us there. So I don't like to say goodbye. These things are too good to end. So I'm just going to say bye for now, and we'll be in touch. Thank everyone for tuning in. Share this. Let's let the world know what's emerging in this beloved community as we move between worlds. Bye for now.